A billionaire's peaceful life begins to crumble when a terrible event shakes his home. His fiancée, who appears elegant, loving, and supportive in front of everyone, hides intentions no one suspects. One day, the twins he adores are found in danger, and all the signs seem to point toward the maid who has cared for the family for years. She is suddenly accused of something she insists she did not do. The situation creates confusion, fear, and tension throughout the mansion, and the billionaire feels torn between the woman he plans to marry and the loyal employee he has trusted for so long. But in the middle of all this chaos, there is a small detail, something almost invisible, that becomes important later. It is an object left behind without much thought, meant to blame the innocent maid. At first, no one notices it. No one questions why it is there or what it means. The fiancée believes it will help her hide the truth, and for a while it seems to work. However, this single detail slowly becomes the key that changes everything. It turns into the quiet piece of evidence that begins to reveal hidden intentions, unexpected betrayals, and a dangerous plan taking place beneath the surface of what looked like a perfect life. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Jonathan Miller felt lost after Emily died during the birth of their twins, Noah and Liam. Every room of the mansion reminded him of her. He walked through the halls with slow steps, trying to understand how life had changed so quickly. He had looked forward to raising the babies with Emily, but now he faced everything alone. His days were filled with confusion as he tried to balance grief and responsibility. When he attended meetings, his mind wandered back to the nursery. When he returned home, he often stood by the cribs without knowing what to say or do. The silence inside the house felt heavy, and he had trouble sleeping. People around him noticed how fragile he had become, but he pretended to be fine. Even though he tried to keep his life organized, he felt that nothing made sense without Emily. He kept expecting her voice, her smile, or her presence. But she was gone, and the emptiness affected every part of his routine. Jonathan began to understand that raising the twins and managing the family business would be far harder than he had imagined, especially while dealing with the pain that refused to fade. Jonathan's attempts to stay strong did not last long. He often found himself staring at work documents without understanding a single line. His assistants repeated the same information several times because he kept forgetting things. When he left the office to visit the nursery, he felt guilty for neglecting work, yet when he focused on business matters, he felt guilty for not spending enough time with Noah and Liam. The pressure increased each day. The staff in the mansion tried to help, but their efforts were limited. They brought meals to his office, reminded him of tasks, and kept the babies comfortable, but none of them could ease the emotional weight he carried. Jonathan's mother called often, but he avoided long conversations because talking about Emily made him break down. The twins needed constant attention, and he wanted to be present, but the sadness was overwhelming. Jonathan began to accept that he could not keep pretending he was managing everything. He felt close to collapsing, unsure of how to move forward while trying to be a good father and a responsible leader. During this vulnerable time, Vanessa Turner approached him in a gentle and calculated way. She appeared when he least expected it, offering a listening ear and calm presence. Jonathan did not question her intentions because he needed support. She spoke softly, told him to breathe, and encouraged him to rest. Her charm made her seem understanding, and her confidence made him feel safe. At first, she kept her distance, respecting the sensitive atmosphere of the house. But as days passed, she started visiting more often. She brought small gifts for the twins and healthy meals prepared especially for him. The staff noticed how quickly she had become part of the daily routine, but Jonathan barely paid attention. He felt relieved to have someone who understood his struggles, someone who did not judge him for being lost. Vanessa's presence reduced some of the silence that had taken over the mansion. She asked about his work, listened attentively, and encouraged him to talk about his feelings. Jonathan welcomed her support, believing that she genuinely cared for his well-being. In his fragile state, he saw her as one of the few people willing to stand by him during such a difficult time. As Vanessa continued appearing in his life, she slowly entered areas of the mansion that once belonged only to Emily. She started helping with small tasks around the nursery, arranging baby clothes and holding the twins while Jonathan rested. She walked through the house as if she already knew the layout, opening curtains, organizing spaces, and giving suggestions about comfort and routine. Jonathan accepted these changes because he did not have the energy to resist. He saw her involvement as kindness, not intrusion. When she sat with him in the living room, he allowed her to sit close. When she offered to accompany him during late-night feedings, he agreed without hesitation. Vanessa's voice became part of the background of his days, filling the silence that had once amplified his pain. The staff continued observing her presence with curiosity, but Jonathan did not notice the growing tension. He was simply grateful to have someone who seemed committed to helping him stay afloat. Every moment she spent by his side made him less aware of how much she was affecting the atmosphere of the mansion. Vanessa acted gently, always appearing at the right moment, always ready to offer comfort that Jonathan desperately needed. Jonathan's emotional exhaustion made him even more dependent on Vanessa's support. He began asking for her opinion about small decisions, such as choosing new clothes for the babies or adjusting his work schedule. She responded with enthusiasm, giving detailed suggestions that made him feel less alone. With each passing day, Jonathan relied more on her presence to get through the long hours. She waited for him after meetings, walked with him through the garden, and sat near him while he fed the twins. Vanessa became a steady part of his routine, not because he planned it, but because he lacked the strength to set boundaries. He believed she brought stability, something he desperately needed. When she touched his shoulder in reassurance, he did not move away. When she reminded him to take breaks, he listened. She learned his habits, his weaknesses, and his moments of silence. Every gesture from her seemed helpful, and Jonathan did not realize how easily she was shaping the space around him. He accepted her presence as a necessary part of his healing, unaware of how quickly she was filling the emotional void Emily had left behind. As the days continued, Jonathan started to imagine that life might eventually return to normal, even though Emily's absence still hurt deeply. Vanessa encouraged this belief, telling him that healing required time and companionship. She prepared tea for him in the evenings, stayed during difficult nights, and talked to him about rebuilding his routine. Jonathan appreciated these moments because they gave him a sense of progress. The mansion no longer felt as silent as before, and he slowly adapted to the new rhythm. Vanessa smiled when she saw him bonding with the twins, and he interpreted her expression as genuine support. He did not notice how confidently she moved through the house, or how comfortable she felt taking roles Emily once held. His focus remained on surviving each day and providing care for Noah and Liam. Vanessa's presence blurred the line between assistance and influence, but Jonathan did not question it. He believed he was moving forward, step by step, with someone offering him steady guidance. In his fragile state, he accepted this new arrangement, unaware of how much his life had shifted since the moment Vanessa first appeared by his side. Grace Thompson brought a steady rhythm back into the house, something that had been missing since Emily's death. She had worked for the Miller family for more than 10 years, so she knew the mansion very well. She also knew how to take care of Noah and Liam in a calm and patient way. Every morning, she checked the nursery, arranged the babies' blankets, and prepared everything they needed for the day. She understood each cry and each expression, and she reacted quickly whenever one of the twins needed comfort. Her presence made the environment feel safer and more organized. Jonathan trusted her completely because she had always been loyal and dedicated. He depended on her to keep the house running smoothly, and he felt relieved knowing the twins were in good hands. Grace respected Jonathan's grief and supported him without asking for anything in return. She focused on her tasks, always moving quietly through the mansion, making sure everything worked as it should. Her experience made a big difference, especially during moments when Jonathan felt overwhelmed. For him, Grace represented stability, someone who could hold everything together when he could not. Her presence filled the mansion with a sense of continuity and care. However, Grace noticed something that left her worried. Whenever Vanessa held Noah or Liam, the babies reacted differently. They became restless, moving their arms and legs as if they wanted to escape. Sometimes they cried immediately, even if they had been calm before. The discomfort was clear to Grace, but Vanessa ignored every sign. She kept saying the babies were only tired or adjusting. Grace disagreed inside her mind, but she remained professional and did not confront Vanessa directly. Instead, she paid attention to the twins and picked them up as soon as Jonathan allowed her to. Noah and Liam relaxed as soon as they were back in her arms, which confirmed her suspicion that something about Vanessa bothered them. Jonathan did not notice this difference because he trusted that everyone around him wanted the best for the children. He appreciated every person who offered help, and he did not imagine that the baby's reactions could mean something important. Grace chose to stay quiet because she did not want to create unnecessary conflict. Her main concern was protecting the twins and keeping the household stable. Jonathan continued relying on Grace for almost everything related to the babies. He often asked for her opinion about their feeding times, their sleeping schedule, or small changes in their routine. Grace responded with the same calm attitude she had always shown. She respected Jonathan and understood the pain he was going through. She worked with dedication, never complaining about the long hours or the extra responsibilities. The mansion was large and every day brought new tasks, but she handled everything efficiently. She also made sure the babies stayed comfortable and relaxed. Her experience allowed her to anticipate problems before they happened, which made Jonathan trust her even more. He felt safe knowing she had been with the family for so long. Grace had cared for the house during better times, and now she cared for it during one of its hardest moments. Her role became even more important, especially because Jonathan still struggled to balance his responsibilities. He needed someone steady, and Grace was that person. Her presence helped him believe that he could keep moving forward, even if his life still felt unstable. While Jonathan relied on Grace in a natural and familiar way, Vanessa started noticing the connection between them. She watched how Jonathan listened to Grace, how he trusted her judgment, and how relaxed he seemed when she was around. This bothered Vanessa more than she expected. She had grown used to being the person who comforted Jonathan, so seeing someone else hold that position made her feel pushed aside. Every time Grace entered the room, Vanessa felt her confidence weaken. She tried to act normal, but inside she could not ignore the irritation growing inside her. She did not like how naturally Grace cared for the twins or how easily the babies calmed down with her. Vanessa felt that Grace's bond with the children placed her in a position of importance that she herself did not have. Watching Grace move through the mansion with ease made Vanessa feel even more insecure. She wanted Jonathan's attention, but Grace's long history with the family seemed to place her above Vanessa in every way. This made Vanessa feel pressured and uncomfortable, even if she did not show it openly. As days passed, Vanessa's discomfort slowly turned into resentment. She paid close attention to Grace's actions, observing every movement and every interaction. When Grace carried the twins, Vanessa watched from a distance. When Jonathan thanked Grace for her work, Vanessa took mental note of his tone. She began noticing things that had never bothered her before, such as the familiarity in Grace's voice when she spoke with Jonathan, or the quick, quiet way she stepped into the nursery. Vanessa felt overshadowed, even though Grace behaved in the same respectful manner she always had. She interpreted Grace's natural role in the house as a threat, something she needed to monitor. Vanessa believed that if Jonathan valued Grace too much, her own influence in the mansion would weaken. So she observed, listened, and remained alert. Her resentment stayed hidden, but it grew a little more each day. She smiled politely when Grace was present, but her mind never stopped analyzing the situation. She convinced herself that paying attention was necessary if she wanted to protect the position she had built in Jonathan's life. Vanessa continued watching Grace closely until it became part of her daily routine. She moved through the mansion pretending to help, but her real focus was always on Grace. She tried to notice everything: when Grace fed the twins, when she cleaned a room, when she spoke with Jonathan, and even how long she stayed inside the nursery. She did not express her feelings openly, but inside she felt a growing tension that she could not ignore. Grace, on the other hand, remained unaware of Vanessa's increasing hostility. She focused only on her responsibilities and the well-being of the babies. She had no interest in competing with anyone. Still, Vanessa interpreted every gesture and every word as a challenge. This quiet conflict filled her thoughts, making her more insecure and more determined to keep watching. Vanessa believed that staying alert would protect her place in Jonathan's life, even though nothing in Grace's behavior suggested she wanted anything beyond doing her job. Yet Vanessa's resentment kept growing in silence, shaping the way she looked at Grace, the twins, and even the future she imagined for herself inside the mansion. Vanessa became even more present in the mansion, acting as if she were an essential part of Jonathan's life. She made herself available from the moment he woke up until late in the evening. She organized dinners that looked simple but were carefully planned to make Jonathan feel supported. She encouraged him to attend corporate events, saying it would help him get back into his routine, and she always stood at his side with a reassuring smile. Jonathan accepted all of this because he believed she truly wanted to help him heal. His heart was still fragile, and having someone constantly offering comfort made him feel less alone. Vanessa used this emotional opening to strengthen her place in his daily life. She spoke softly, stayed close to him during conversations, and acted as if she understood every detail of what he was going through. Jonathan did not question her intentions. He felt grateful for the company and did not realize how much control she had begun to build through these actions. To him, Vanessa looked like someone who brought stability and companionship during a painful moment. He trusted her presence, unaware that her involvement in his life had become deliberate and strategic, rather than simply supportive. While Vanessa increased her influence, Grace continued her routine without changing her behavior. She woke early, cared for Noah and Liam, and managed every part of the house the same way she always had. But even in her calm manner, she noticed that something inside the mansion had shifted. The twins cried more often, especially when Vanessa entered the room. Their bodies tensed, their faces tightened, and they looked for Grace with clear discomfort. Grace picked them up quickly, trying to ease their agitation, but she knew their reactions meant something important. She also noticed the new atmosphere in the house. Spaces that used to feel peaceful now carried a strange tension. Vanessa moved around with confidence, behaving as if she belonged to every corner of the mansion. Grace kept her distance, focused on her responsibilities, but she could not ignore how different things felt. Even the staff spoke more quietly, aware that the household dynamic had changed. Grace did not speak badly of Vanessa and did not confront her, but she observed everything with careful attention. She wanted to protect the twins, and their constant discomfort around Vanessa made her more alert. She understood that the mansion was no longer guided only by grief and recovery. Now, there was something else growing inside it. Jonathan, relieved to have emotional support again, accepted Vanessa's stronger presence without noticing the tension forming under the surface. He believed that Vanessa's involvement was harmless and even helpful. When she accompanied him to events, he felt more confident. When she prepared dinners, he appreciated the effort. He thought she was easing his burden rather than creating new problems. In his mind, Grace and Vanessa simply represented two different parts of his life. One connected to the past he shared with Emily, and the other connected to the new direction he hoped to find. Because of this, he did not pay attention to the looks exchanged between them or the small reactions that happened when they were in the same room. Jonathan was still dealing with sadness and confusion, so he did not imagine that Vanessa might feel threatened or that Grace might feel uneasy. He only saw what he wanted to see, a woman trying to help him move forward. This blind confidence made him completely unaware of the silent conflict building around him. He kept his focus on work, the twins, and his attempt to heal, leaving him oblivious to everything happening beneath the surface of the household. Vanessa, now officially introduced as Jonathan's fiancée, treated Grace with polite words but cold eyes. She smiled when speaking, but the expression never reached her gaze. Grace felt this difference immediately, yet she remained respectful. Vanessa approached her with superficial kindness, asking about the babies or household matters, but her tone carried a sharp edge that only Grace seemed to notice. She spoke as if she were evaluating every answer, searching for something hidden. Grace responded calmly, avoiding unnecessary conversation, but she sensed the hostility behind every look. Whenever Vanessa held the twins and they cried, Vanessa pretended not to understand the cause, dismissing their reaction as normal fussiness. Grace disagreed, but stayed silent, knowing Jonathan trusted Vanessa's intentions. Vanessa's coldness grew stronger each day. She acted possessive toward Jonathan and watched Grace with increasing suspicion. Her polite mask never slipped in front of him, but when his back was turned, her eyes hardened. This silent aggression became part of the house's atmosphere. Grace felt it clearly, even if she never mentioned it aloud. Vanessa wanted control, and Grace stood in the way simply by existing. As Vanessa continued to assert herself, the children's reactions became even more obvious. They grew restless whenever she entered the nursery, making small cries that quickly turned into louder ones. Grace noticed the pattern and tried to comfort them, but the problem always returned as soon as Vanessa came close again. Vanessa ignored this, insisting that the babies were merely adjusting to new routines. She acted unaware, yet Grace suspected she noticed the reactions too. When Jonathan was present, Vanessa exaggerated her kindness, speaking sweetly to the twins even when they cried in her arms. Grace found it difficult to watch because she knew the babies were uncomfortable. She could not understand why Jonathan did not notice the difference, but she knew he was emotionally exhausted and easily distracted. Vanessa took advantage of this weakness, presenting herself as the perfect partner while masking the growing hostility she felt inside. Grace continued doing her job with dedication, but she remained cautious. The mansion no longer felt peaceful. Something heavy lingered in the air, a tension formed by Vanessa's attempts to claim more control and the twins' instinctive discomfort in her presence. The mansion, once marked mainly by silent grief, now carried an undercurrent of competition. Vanessa tried to position herself as the central figure in Jonathan's life, acting as if everything revolved around her support. She watched Grace carefully, studying every move she made. Her attention was constant and calculated, as though she believed Grace represented a threat to her place in the household. Jonathan remained unaware of any of this, trusting both women for different reasons. He thought the house was finally moving forward, unaware that a quiet clash was unfolding beneath the surface. Grace continued caring for the twins, focused on her responsibilities, while Vanessa continued protecting her new role with determination. This created a silent struggle, one that neither woman spoke about, but both could feel. The home that had once been filled with sadness now held something sharper, something unsettled. Vanessa wanted to secure her place, and she believed watching Grace closely was necessary. Grace, although calm and steady, sensed the growing resentment directed at her, and in the middle of all this, the two babies reacted in ways that revealed the truth neither adult wanted to confront directly. Vanessa made the atmosphere in the mansion heavier when she began interfering directly with the twins' care. She watched every move Grace made and criticized even the smallest actions. She said Grace's methods were old and ineffective, using a calm tone but sharp words. She claimed the twins needed a more modern approach, even though she had no experience caring for babies. Grace listened quietly, trying not to react, but the comments hurt because she had always cared for the children with dedication. Jonathan, exhausted by business meetings and constant corporate demands, tried to avoid any argument. He told both women that they simply had different opinions and that misunderstandings were normal in a busy house. He wanted peace and believed the situation would eventually settle if he stayed neutral, but his lack of involvement allowed Vanessa to become even bolder. She spoke as if her judgment was superior and acted as if Grace's long years of service did not matter. Grace maintained her calm, but she felt the weight of the changes. The mansion no longer felt balanced, and every day brought new signs that the peaceful routine was slipping away. Grace began noticing strange details that did not make sense. Items in the nursery were moved to unusual places, even though she always organized things the same way. Bottles that she had filled earlier were left half open. Schedules she carefully maintained were suddenly altered without explanation. Some staff members mentioned receiving instructions that did not match what Grace had communicated. When she asked questions, the answers were inconsistent. Something was clearly wrong. Vanessa dismissed these concerns, saying Grace was too strict or too forgetful, but Grace knew her own routine and knew these changes were not accidents. The confusion created unnecessary stress and made her work harder. She tried to correct everything quietly, not wanting the twins to be affected by the disorganization. The babies needed stability, especially after everything that had happened to the family. Grace felt worried because the changes were subtle but constant, as if someone were trying to undermine her work without leaving clear proof. She suspected who was responsible, but she had no intention of accusing anyone without certainty. Instead, she stayed observant, watching closely for patterns. Her priority remained the twins, even as she sensed that something darker was forming behind misplaced objects and altered instructions. Vanessa started spending more time near the service area, a part of the mansion where she rarely went before. She walked through the hallways where the staff worked, asking questions that felt out of place. She wanted to know who handled certain tasks, who cleaned specific rooms, and who decided the daily routines. She acted as if she were auditing the entire staff. Her tone carried hidden accusations, even when her words sounded polite. She hinted that some workers might be disorganized or careless, even though she had no evidence. The staff felt uncomfortable around her, answering quickly and avoiding unnecessary interaction. Grace heard their concerns, but tried to reassure them, even though she also found Vanessa's behavior troubling. The situation created a tense environment in a part of the house that used to be peaceful and predictable. Vanessa seemed to be searching for weaknesses, or perhaps trying to create the impression that problems existed. Grace observed her carefully, noticing how Vanessa's visits always resulted in some kind of confusion or discomfort. She understood that Vanessa wanted influence not only in Jonathan's life, but also in the structure of the household. Grace remained calm, but she was aware that this intrusion into the service area signaled a bigger shift. While Vanessa moved deeper into the daily routines of the mansion, the twins reacted more strongly to her presence. They cried quickly when she approached, turning their faces away or stretching their arms toward Grace. Their discomfort was clear and consistent, not just a moment of fussiness. Every time Vanessa tried to interact with them, the babies became tense, their peaceful mood disappearing instantly. Grace noticed this pattern and felt increasingly worried. She knew children could sense things adults sometimes ignored. Vanessa, however, dismissed the reactions, saying the babies simply had strong personalities or were being difficult. She refused to consider the possibility that they felt uneasy around her. Jonathan remained unaware of the twins' behaviors because he often arrived late or was distracted by work. When he saw the babies crying, he assumed they were tired or hungry. He did not connect their reactions to Vanessa. Grace wished he would notice the truth, but she respected his exhaustion and did not push him. Still, the baby's reactions added to the growing unease inside the mansion. It was another sign that something was shifting, something that Grace could not yet fully understand, but could definitely feel. Jonathan continued trying to maintain peace between Grace and Vanessa, believing that both women cared about the household in their own ways. He avoided choosing sides because he feared creating more problems. He thought the disagreements came from stress, not intentional actions. His busy schedule made him unable to see the deeper issues developing around him. Vanessa used his distraction to continue questioning Grace's methods. She spoke softly, but with a tone that implied she knew better. Jonathan, tired and overwhelmed, tried to believe that their differences were harmless. Grace respected Jonathan and understood he did not want conflict, but she also saw that his attempts to balance things only allowed Vanessa more room to act freely. Grace carried the weight of keeping the twins safe, keeping the routine stable, and staying watchful. She did all of this quietly because she did not want to bring more stress to Jonathan, but inside, her concern grew. She sensed that something deeper than simple disagreements was happening. Jonathan did not see it, but Grace felt the tension spreading slowly through every part of the house. By now, the mansion felt different in a way that Grace could not ignore. The silent tension grew with each passing day, turning familiar rooms into unsettled spaces. There was no open argument, no loud confrontation, but the atmosphere carried a constant pressure. Vanessa moved with confidence, acting as if she had a rightful claim over everything. Grace continued her duties with dedication, but she stayed more alert than ever. She felt that something dark was approaching, something she could not describe, but could clearly sense. The small changes, the baby's reactions, Vanessa's interference, and the confusion among the staff all pointed to a slow, creeping problem. Grace did not panic, but she prepared herself mentally. She knew she needed to remain calm, attentive, and steady for the sake of Noah and Liam. They depended on her, and she would not fail them. The mansion no longer felt like a home trying to heal. It felt like a place where unseen forces were shifting the balance. Grace followed her routine with quiet determination, knowing that the situation was getting worse, even if no one else acknowledged it. She waited, watched, and stayed strong, hoping the truth would reveal itself before the damage became irreversible. Vanessa woke up that morning with a calm expression that did not match the tension growing inside the mansion. She moved through the halls with slow steps, watching every detail and waiting for the moment she needed. Jonathan left earlier than usual, busy with work responsibilities, and Vanessa said goodbye with a soft smile. The second he was gone, her expression changed. She walked directly to the staff and informed them that everyone had to leave the house for a period of internal maintenance. She used a firm tone that left no room for questions. The employees exchanged confused looks, but they obeyed. Soon, the mansion became completely silent, with no footsteps, no voices, and no usual activity in the halls. Vanessa closed the main door and stood still for a moment, confirming that no one else was there. She felt prepared to continue her plan. Her movements became quicker and more confident now that she was alone. She went to the nursery, took Noah and Liam from their cribs, and carried both babies outside. The atmosphere felt heavy, but Vanessa acted with clear intention, as if everything was going exactly the way she had imagined. Outside, Vanessa headed toward the large metal bathtub placed in the yard. She placed Noah and Liam inside it without hesitating. Their small bodies were exposed to the growing heat as she turned on the water and let it fill the tub. The babies began crying immediately, their voices loud and desperate, but she did not stop. She continued filling the tub until the water reached a level she found suitable. Then she took a pair of yellow gloves, identical to the ones Grace used for cleaning, and hung them over the rim of the metal tub. Her actions were deliberate and slow, as if she wanted every detail to be noticeable later. Noah and Liam's crying became stronger as the hot water surrounded them. They squirmed, their faces red with discomfort, but Vanessa looked at them without emotion. She stepped back after placing the gloves and studied the scene as if evaluating her work. Everything looked the way she had planned. The cries echoed through the yard, but she paid no attention to them, turning her back and heading toward the mansion again. Inside the house, Vanessa moved through the rooms with no sense of urgency. She did not check on the babies or respond to their cries. Instead, she stayed indoors for hours, walking from one area to another, sometimes sitting down, sometimes simply waiting. The sound of the twins crying grew louder at times, weaker at others, but she treated it as background noise. She acted as though the house were completely empty. Every minute that passed was part of her plan. She wanted time to move forward, creating a scene that would confuse anyone who discovered it later. The quiet inside the mansion contrasted with the steady crying coming from outside, but Vanessa did not look out the window. She kept her attention only on herself, occasionally fixing her hair or adjusting her clothes. She did not rush, because she wanted everything to look natural when someone finally returned. The hours passed slowly, yet Vanessa remained in control. She ignored the discomfort she should have felt. Instead, she behaved as if the whole day were ordinary. She waited, confident that everything was unfolding exactly as she intended. As the afternoon continued, the crying from outside began to sound weaker. Vanessa did not react. She simply moved to different areas of the mansion, occasionally checking the clock, but never checking the babies. Her face remained calm, almost expressionless, while she walked up and down the halls. When she felt that enough time had passed, she finally went toward the front of the house. She positioned herself near the door, adjusting her appearance with slow, careful movements. She fixed her hair, straightened her clothes, and practiced a soft, innocent expression. She wanted to look surprised and confused when Jonathan arrived. Vanessa knew he trusted her deeply and believed she always acted with good intentions. Her plan relied on that. She rehearsed how she would speak, how her voice would sound gentle and concerned, and how she would react as if she had no idea what had happened. Outside, Noah and Liam remained in the tub, but Vanessa stayed where she was, preparing herself. She took one last deep breath and practiced the expression she wanted. Wide eyes, a slight frown, and a confused look. She wanted to seem like someone who had no part in anything wrong. Her posture became softer, her movements slower, and she held her hands together as if she were nervous. She stood next to the door, listening for any sign of Jonathan's return. She expected him to arrive much later, which would have allowed her time to fully shape the situation. But then she heard the sound of his car approaching earlier than she calculated. She did not panic. She simply shifted her stance and prepared to play the role she had chosen. She tilted her head slightly, pretending she had been waiting patiently. She wanted to appear caring, thoughtful, and unaware of the chaos happening outside. Everything was ready for the moment Jonathan walked through the door. She was determined to make him believe whatever version of the story she would tell. Vanessa kept her eyes on the entrance, holding her breath briefly as Jonathan stepped inside. She made sure her expression matched the innocent facade she had practiced. She greeted him softly, as if nothing strange had happened in the house. She prepared to show concern, surprise, or sadness, whichever reaction would seem most believable in the moment. Her plan depended on her ability to convince him with her performance. Jonathan, unaware of anything outside, looked tired from work. Vanessa was ready to guide his attention, ready to lead him toward whatever story she would present. She stood close enough to show comfort, but far enough to appear uninvolved. Behind her calm appearance, she stayed alert, knowing that the next few minutes would decide everything. The house was silent, except for the fading cries outside, and Vanessa kept her posture steady. Everything she had done that day led to this moment, and she waited for Jonathan to take the next step, unaware of the danger she had crafted so carefully. Jonathan arrived home expecting a quiet evening, but the moment he stepped out of the car, he heard loud, desperate crying coming from the garden. The sound was sharp and continuous, pulling him immediately out of his tired state. His heart raced as he ran across the yard, unsure of what he would find. At the same time, Grace returned to the mansion, carrying her work bag and planning to check on the twins, as she always did. She heard the same cries and rushed toward the garden, her steps quick and alarmed. When Jonathan reached the large metal tub, he froze in shock. Noah and Liam were inside the hot water, their faces red and their bodies trembling as they cried uncontrollably. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat as he tried to understand what he was seeing. His eyes moved from the twins to the pair of yellow gloves hanging over the rim of the tub. They were identical to the gloves Grace used every day for cleaning. His confusion turned into fear, and his fear quickly turned into a painful conclusion. Grace arrived a moment later, and the expression on her face changed to horror when she saw the twins inside the tub. Grace dropped her bag without thinking and ran to the babies, lifting them out of the hot water as fast as she could. Her hands shook as she held them close, trying to soothe their cries. She whispered their names, desperate to calm them. Jonathan stood back, shocked and unable to process what was happening. He looked at the gloves again, his mind repeating the same thought over and over. Those were Grace's gloves. The woman who had cared for his family for years, someone he trusted completely, was now tied to a scene that made no sense to him. Grace turned to Jonathan, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. She tried to explain immediately, telling him she would never leave the babies like that something was terribly wrong. Her voice cracked as she spoke, and tears ran down her cheeks. She kept repeating that she had just returned, that she had nothing to do with what he had found. But Jonathan's emotions were overwhelmed by the shock of the moment. His chest tightened, and he struggled to respond. The crying of the twins filled the garden, adding stress to a situation already drowning in panic. As Grace tried to speak, Vanessa stepped out through the doorway of the mansion. She walked toward them slowly, with a carefully measured expression on her face. Her eyebrows were raised, and her mouth was slightly open, as if she were genuinely surprised by what she was seeing. She placed a hand over her chest and let out a quiet gasp, perfectly timed to make her appearance seem innocent. She looked at Jonathan with wide eyes, as if she were just as confused as he was. Then she looked at Grace, and her expression subtly shifted into one of concern, mixed with suspicion. She said nothing accusatory, but her silence carried a heavy implication. The way she positioned herself, the way she looked between the babies, the gloves, and Grace, it all pushed Jonathan further into doubt. Jonathan tried to make sense of everything, but the scene felt overwhelming. Vanessa stepped closer and gently touched his arm, as if offering comfort. She said softly that she didn't understand what had happened, but her tone suggested something had gone terribly wrong under Grace's watch. Grace heard the subtle suggestion and felt her stomach twist in fear. She clutched Noah and Liam tightly, her heart pounding as she tried to defend herself. She explained again that she had just arrived, that she would never harm the babies, that someone was trying to set her up. Her voice grew louder as she pleaded for Jonathan to believe her. Her hands trembled as she held the twins, trying to calm them, even as her own fear rose. Jonathan looked torn, his expression caught between disbelief and pain. He had trusted Grace for years, but seeing the babies in the tub, seeing the gloves, and hearing Vanessa's quiet, careful comments pushed him toward a conclusion he did not want to reach. Grace stepped forward, trying to close the distance between them, but Jonathan raised a hand, asking her to stop. His voice shook as he told her to give him space. The words cut deeper than Grace expected. She felt a wave of despair wash over her, knowing he was starting to believe what the scene suggested. The tension in the garden grew thicker with every passing second. The babies continued crying, their voices hoarse from the distress. Vanessa stood next to Jonathan, acting as though she too was devastated by the situation. Grace tried once more to explain, speaking through tears, insisting that she was innocent. But her words felt powerless in the face of the scene Vanessa had constructed. Jonathan struggled to stay calm, but his voice grew sharp as he asked Grace why her gloves were there. Grace stared at them, realizing how perfectly placed they were. She tried to say that someone must have put them there deliberately, but the explanation sounded weak to Jonathan in that moment of emotional chaos. He felt betrayed, confused, and scared. Grace felt her chest tighten when she saw the doubt in his eyes. She understood then that she was being blamed for something she would never do, something she could not have prevented or foreseen. Her heart ached as she realized Vanessa's silent influence was shaping Jonathan's perception. Jonathan stood between both women, holding his breath for a long moment. He looked at the twins, still red and crying in Grace's arms. He looked at the gloves. He looked at Vanessa, whose face was soft and sad. Then he looked at Grace again, unable to find clarity through the overwhelming emotions clouding his mind. He felt pushed into a corner, and the easiest path was to trust what he saw, even if part of him still resisted. With a trembling voice, he told Grace to step back and give him the babies. Grace hesitated, appearing broken. She handed Noah and Liam to him slowly, tears falling uncontrollably. She tried to speak again, but Jonathan cut her off, saying he needed time to understand what had happened. His tone was cold, distant, and full of hurt. Grace felt her knees weaken. She stepped away, feeling as though the world around her was collapsing. She had been wrongly accused, and the man she respected and supported for years now believed the worst of her. Grace remained still for several seconds, unable to breathe properly as she processed what had just happened. Jonathan held the babies close, his face tense with shock and anger, while Vanessa stood quietly beside him, her expression calm beneath the mask of concern. Grace realized with a deep sinking feeling that she had been framed and that Jonathan could not see it. Her heart broke as she understood that everything she had built in that home, the trust, the years of service, the bond with the babies, was being destroyed in one single moment. She took a slow step back, her eyes filled with disbelief and pain. She tried to say that she would never harm Noah and Liam, but her voice cracked under the weight of despair. The garden felt heavy, cold, and unbearably silent, except for the fading cries of the twins. Grace stood there, stunned, as Jonathan turned away from her, unable to face her any longer. Grace felt overwhelmed after being wrongly accused, but her determination grew stronger instead of fading. She knew she had to prove her innocence, not only for herself, but also for Noah and Liam, whom she loved deeply. The first thing she did was carefully pick up the yellow gloves that had been left by the metal tub. She held them with steady hands, refusing to panic. Grace studied every detail, turning the gloves inside out, checking the texture of the material, and inspecting the seams. When she looked closely at the inside of the gloves, she noticed something unusual, small dark residues stuck beneath the inner fingernail areas. They looked like traces left from someone else's skin or contact. The discovery shook her because it clearly suggested that another person had worn the gloves that day. Even though Grace felt fear building inside her, she knew this was an important clue. She placed the gloves in a clean bag, sealed it tightly, and promised herself she would find the truth. She had spent years taking care of the mansion and the twins, and she refused to let a lie destroy everything she had protected for so long. Grace realized she had no support from the family. Jonathan avoided looking at her, and the staff remained distant, unsure of what to believe. With no one on her side and no way to prove her innocence within the mansion, she understood she needed outside help. She remembered an old acquaintance, someone she trusted, an experienced professional who worked at an independent laboratory. Without telling anyone, Grace contacted him in a calm but urgent tone, explaining that she needed private assistance. She traveled discreetly to meet him, bringing the sealed gloves. She explained the situation but avoided personal details, wanting to keep the matter focused on facts. Her acquaintance agreed to help and promised complete confidentiality. Grace handed over the gloves, watching anxiously as he stored them carefully. She left the laboratory feeling nervous but hopeful for the first time since the terrible incident. She knew the truth could be uncovered through science, and she held on to that possibility with everything she had. She returned to the mansion quietly, knowing she had taken the first step toward defending herself. The waiting period felt long, but soon the results arrived. Grace returned to the laboratory, her heart pounding as she walked in. The technician explained the findings with a serious expression. The material found inside the gloves contained genetic traces from a woman, someone who was not Grace. The results were clear and undeniable. Grace felt a mix of relief and fear. The relief came because the evidence proved she had been framed, but the fear remained because she understood what this meant. Someone else had worn those gloves, someone who intended to use them against her. Her mind immediately connected the dots, forming a clear suspicion. Vanessa had been present, she had gained control inside the house, and she had shown hostility toward Grace for weeks. The evidence did not directly name Vanessa, but it strongly pointed in her direction. Grace took the results carefully, placing them with the same caution she had used with the gloves. She thanked her acquaintance sincerely and promised to keep everything confidential. With the documents in her hands, she felt stronger. The truth was becoming clearer, and she finally had proof that could expose the lies told about her. While Grace collected evidence, Jonathan kept his distance. He believed he was protecting Noah and Liam by avoiding her. Every time he thought of the babies crying in the bathtub, the image of the gloves returned to his mind. He felt guilty for doubting Grace after so many years, but he also felt terrified of failing as a father. His emotional exhaustion made it difficult for him to think clearly. He avoided any conversation with Grace, believing space would help him understand the situation. When he walked through the halls of the mansion, he stayed focused on his children and tried to ignore the growing tension around him. Vanessa continued comforting him, insisting that he needed to stay calm. Jonathan still felt troubled, but he accepted the distance as the safest choice for the moment. He had no idea that Grace was working tirelessly to uncover the truth. He did not know that she was fighting for her reputation, her future, and her connection to the children. Lost in his confusion, Jonathan believed he was doing what was best, unaware that he had fallen into the very trap that had been set for him. Vanessa, on the other hand, moved through the mansion with a calm confidence. She appeared relaxed, walking softly through the corridors, smiling politely when staff members passed by. She acted as though nothing unusual had happened, and her behavior seemed almost calculated. She avoided drawing attention and did not mention the incident unless Jonathan brought it up. When he did, she responded gently, saying she hoped the situation would resolve soon. Her voice was always even, and she never showed worry. She spent time near Jonathan, offering support and speaking with soft reassurance. She made sure her actions looked natural, never rushed or overly involved. Anyone observing her might think she had nothing to hide. Vanessa's quiet behavior allowed her to blend into the daily routine of the house without raising suspicion. But behind her calm expression, there was a careful focus. She watched everything and everyone, making sure that no one questioned her role or her presence. To the outside eye, she looked perfectly comfortable, untouched by fear or doubt, while Grace struggled alone to clear her name. Grace knew she needed more than just the laboratory results. She had to present a complete case, something strong enough to confront the lies that had trapped her. She began collecting everything that could help: written schedules, working hours, staff statements, and reminders of where she had been on the day of the incident. She spoke quietly with a few employees who still respected her, asking if they had noticed anything strange before they were sent away. She recorded their words carefully, storing every detail. She studied the mansion's routine, checking when Vanessa had been present and when she had stayed near the nursery. Grace organized all the documents one by one, creating a timeline of events that showed the inconsistencies in Vanessa's behavior. Every piece of evidence she gathered brought her closer to proving the truth. Even though she felt scared and lonely, she kept going. She refused to give up. She refused to let a lie destroy everything she had built. With each passing day, her determination grew. She knew that when the moment came, she would confront the false story directly, armed with proof that could not be denied. Grace went to the local police department early in the morning, carrying all the documents she had gathered, and the laboratory results that proved another woman had worn the yellow gloves. She sat in front of the investigators and explained everything calmly, step by step. She showed the sealed bag containing the gloves, the printed DNA report, and the records proving she was not inside the mansion during the critical time when the twins were placed in the tub. Grace spoke slowly, making sure every detail was clear. She described how the gloves had been found and how she immediately noticed the dark residue inside them. The officers listened carefully, reading the documents and reviewing the evidence she presented. The DNA results caught their attention first because they were precise, technical, and difficult to dismiss. Grace also showed her time records, proving she had been away from the mansion during the incident. The investigators asked several questions, and Grace answered each one with honesty and consistency. By the end of the conversation, the officers admitted that her statements matched the physical evidence. They decided the situation required deeper investigation. For the first time since the incident, Grace felt a small sense of hope returning. The investigators began gathering additional information to verify Grace's claims. They requested authorization to examine the mansion's external and internal camera recordings from the day of the incident. Once permission was granted, they watched the footage carefully. The recordings clearly showed Vanessa ordering all the employees to leave the property earlier than usual, claiming the mansion needed a period of internal maintenance. The staff left reluctantly, and the cameras captured the exact moment the last worker exited the house. This detail matched Grace's testimony and raised immediate suspicion. The investigators also noted that Vanessa stayed behind completely alone with the twins, with no one else present to supervise. This contradicted Vanessa's previous claim that she had no involvement with the situation. The officers discussed the timeline among themselves and agreed that Vanessa's actions created an unusual opportunity. They documented everything they saw on the footage, making detailed notes of the times, movements, and interactions. The evidence suggested that the incident was not accidental, but planned. Grace, who remained outside the investigation room, felt anxious but remained hopeful that the truth was finally coming to light. After reviewing the camera footage, the investigators interviewed several employees from the mansion. Each one described Vanessa's behavior during the days leading up to the incident. Their testimonies were consistent. Many of them recalled her walking around the service areas without explanation, asking strange questions and monitoring the routine closely. Some said she seemed agitated at times, especially when Grace was nearby. Others said she acted unusually controlling on the day she ordered them to leave, offering no clear reason. These statements matched the growing suspicion that Vanessa had planned the entire situation. The investigators wrote down the witnesses' descriptions carefully, comparing them with the timeline already established by the recordings. Every statement from the staff supported Grace's innocence. The officers noticed that none of the employees had any motive to lie, which made their testimonies even stronger. With each interview, the case became clearer. The investigators realized that the incident was not a misunderstanding, but something intentional. They gathered all the witness reports and added them to the evidence file. Grace waited in another room, unaware of how many employees had stepped forward. The consistent testimonies strengthened the investigation, creating a foundation strong enough to fully reopen the case. With enough evidence gathered, the investigators confronted Vanessa directly. They asked her to come to the station to clarify some details about the incident. Vanessa arrived with a calm expression, pretending she had nothing to hide. At first, she claimed she had only tried to help Jonathan and the twins. She insisted she had no reason to harm anyone and suggested that Grace had simply been careless. But the investigators began showing her the evidence one piece at a time. They displayed the camera footage showing her ordering the staff to leave. Vanessa tried to explain it away as a misunderstanding. Then they showed the timeline proving she was alone with the twins for several hours. She hesitated, struggling to keep her explanations straight. Finally, they mentioned the DNA found inside the gloves. Vanessa froze for a moment, caught by surprise. She denied wearing the gloves, but her voice lost confidence. Every time she attempted to justify her actions, her story changed slightly. The contradictions became obvious. The investigators took note of every inconsistency. Vanessa's calm expression faded, replaced by visible tension. She realized the situation was slipping out of her control, but the investigators continued pressing with clear facts. As the questioning continued, the investigators revealed another disturbing discovery. They had checked Vanessa's internet searches and found several inquiries related to methods of transferring assets, inheritance procedures, and legal ways to gain financial control over a partner. These searches were conducted weeks before the incident, which raised even more suspicion. The officers also found text messages between Vanessa and an unknown contact. The messages were vague, but suggested discussions about timing, opportunities, and removing obstacles. One message implied that someone needed to be kept away for a plan to work. When faced with this information, Vanessa tried to claim the messages were unrelated, but the timing matched everything else in the case. The investigators compared the messages to the camera footage, the witness statements, and the DNA results. The pattern became undeniable. Vanessa had created a deliberate plan and tried to shift the blame onto Grace. Every new piece of evidence made her explanations appear weaker. The investigators realized they were dealing with a carefully constructed setup, not a moment of panic or poor judgment. By the end of the investigation, the entire plan Vanessa had created began to fall apart, piece by piece. The police compiled all evidence into a clear and organized timeline. They documented Grace's absence from the mansion, the DNA found inside the gloves, the orders Vanessa gave to the staff, the witness testimonies, the contradictory statements she made during questioning, and the suspicious online searches. The case became stronger with each detail. Grace, who had quietly fought to prove her innocence, finally saw her efforts turn into something solid. The investigators assured her that they were moving forward with the case and that the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Vanessa, once confident and composed, now faced a growing list of accusations supported by facts she could not explain away. The investigation gained strength and direction, breaking apart the false story she had created. Grace walked out of the station with relief in her chest, knowing that her name was being cleared and that justice was finally uncovering what she had endured. Jonathan received the news of Vanessa's arrest in a state of shock. When the authorities confirmed that the genetic material found inside the gloves matched hers, and that the collected records proved she had been responsible for abandoning the twins in the hot tub, he stood completely still, unable to process everything at once. The truth struck him with painful force. He had trusted Vanessa, allowed her into his home, and believed her kind gestures. Now he realized every action had been part of a manipulation he never saw coming. His chest felt tight as he replayed past moments in his head, noticing signs he had ignored. The betrayal overwhelmed him, leaving him feeling guilty, confused, and ashamed. The image of Noah and Liam crying helplessly came back to his mind, and he felt his stomach twist with anger at himself for believing lies so easily. He questioned his judgment and wondered how he could have failed to protect his children. Jonathan sat alone for a long time, trying to understand the situation and accept that someone he trusted had been capable of such cruelty. His heart felt heavy, and even breathing seemed difficult as he faced the truth about Vanessa. Grace was officially declared innocent, and the officers informed her that her name had been fully cleared. The moment she heard the words, she felt a deep relief wash over her body. For so long she had lived under doubt, fear, and humiliation, and now justice had finally placed everything in the right place. She returned to the mansion with a cautious heart, unsure of how the atmosphere would feel after everything that had happened. The staff greeted her respectfully, aware of the injustice she had suffered. She walked through the familiar halls, remembering the painful day when she was wrongfully accused. Even though her name was restored, the memory still hurt, but she held her head high, knowing she had done nothing wrong. When she entered the nursery, she paused for a moment, looking at the babies' beds and the toys she had arranged so many times before. The space felt different now, not because the room had changed, but because she finally felt free to stand in it again without fear. Grace took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to return to the work she loved. Noah and Liam responded to her return in a way that surprised no one who truly understood them. As soon as Grace approached their cribs, the twins recognized her presence. Their bodies relaxed and their expressions softened with familiarity. Noah reached out his small hand first, and Liam followed, both seeking the comfort they had missed. Grace picked them up gently, holding one in each arm, and felt their warm bodies settle against her. Their breathing slowed, and their eyes grew calm, showing trust and safety. It was clear they had felt her absence deeply, even if they could not express it with words. Their reaction confirmed the bond she had built with them over years of care. The moment filled Grace's eyes with tears, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. She whispered to them softly, promising they were safe, and that she would never abandon them. The twins responded with quiet sounds, small whimpers that slowly shifted into peaceful silence. Jonathan watched this scene from the doorway, feeling a sharp ache in his heart. Seeing how naturally the babies settled in Grace's arms only deepened his guilt for believing Vanessa's accusations. The contrast between Grace's genuine care and Vanessa's deceit became painfully clear. Jonathan stepped into the room with hesitant steps, unsure of how to speak to Grace after everything he had done. His voice trembled as he called her name. Grace turned toward him, still holding the twins gently. Their eyes met, and Jonathan felt a painful mix of gratitude and regret. He approached slowly and admitted that he had failed her, that he had doubted her when she needed him to trust her the most. Jonathan apologized sincerely, explaining that the pressure, fear, and emotional manipulation had clouded his judgment. He told her he regretted every word and action that had made her feel unwanted in the home she had helped maintain for years. Grace listened quietly, her face calm but her eyes emotional. She had suffered deeply because of the accusation, yet she understood the emotional turmoil Jonathan had been trapped in. She did not respond immediately, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. When she finally spoke, her tone was steady. She said she forgave him, not because the pain had vanished, but because holding on to anger would only harm everyone, especially the twins. Her forgiveness gave Jonathan a sense of relief he desperately needed, though he knew it would take time to rebuild her trust. In the days that followed Vanessa's arrest, the mansion slowly began to regain its stability. With her gone, the anxious atmosphere that had taken over the household slowly faded. The staff resumed their routines without fear of being watched or questioned. Grace organized the nursery again, returning everything to its proper place. Jonathan made a firm decision to remove every trace of Vanessa from his life. He gave instructions for her belongings to be removed and blocked all access she had to his home, his finances, and his family. He worked with his legal team to ensure she would never come near Noah and Liam again. At the same time, he focused on restoring the emotional balance that had been damaged. He spent more time with the twins, learning their cues, participating in their routines, and building a stronger connection with them. Jonathan also relied on Grace for guidance, appreciating her experience and dedication without taking advantage of her kindness. The mansion, once filled with suspicion and tension, slowly became a place of healing again. Jonathan continued working on rebuilding his life, aware that he needed to regain not only the twins' stability, but also his own emotional strength. He reflected every day on the mistakes he had made and promised himself he would never let manipulation blind him again. He sought professional advice to understand how he had allowed himself to be deceived and how to prevent similar situations in the future. Grace remained by his side, not as someone he depended on blindly, but as a trusted presence who had always shown genuine loyalty. Together they created a calmer environment for the children, focusing on consistency and safety. Noah and Liam grew more peaceful with each passing day, responding positively to the new harmony in the house. Jonathan felt grateful every time he saw them smile or relax, knowing he had come dangerously close to losing them under Vanessa's control. He understood now that true protection came from awareness, humility, and honesty. As the mansion found its balance again, Jonathan silently vowed to honor the trust Grace had given back to him and to build a future where his children would grow up surrounded by honesty, stability, and genuine care. Jonathan noticed as the months passed that his connection with Grace was growing in a quiet and natural way. What began as simple cooperation inside the mansion slowly turned into something deeper. He watched how she handled the twins with patience, how she soothed them when they were restless, and how she always put their well-being first. Her dedication was steady, never forced, and it showed in every action she took. Jonathan realized he felt safe when she was around because she always brought clarity and calm to situations that once overwhelmed him. He also began to understand qualities in her that he had overlooked before. He saw her courage in the way she defended the truth, her kindness in every gesture toward the children, and her loyalty in the way she stayed by the family's side through the hardest moments. These traits softened him in ways he did not expect. He found himself wanting to spend more time with her, to listen to her thoughts, and to understand the quiet strength she carried. Their conversations grew longer and more comfortable, filled with small stories and sincere exchanges. Little by little, Jonathan realized that Grace had become an important part of his emotional life, not only the children's. As the household settled into a peaceful routine, Noah and Liam continued to grow healthy and full of energy. Their early trauma left no visible marks thanks to the consistent comfort they received from Grace. They laughed easily, crawled quickly around the nursery, and reached for her with excitement every time she entered the room. Jonathan loved watching this bond develop. It gave him a sense of stability he had not felt in a long time. The twins' happiness was a constant reminder of how essential Grace had been through all the chaos. The mansion no longer felt heavy or tense. Instead, it felt like a home slowly rebuilding itself. Grace brought structure to the days, creating rhythms that helped the babies grow with confidence. Jonathan followed her guidance closely, learning from her experience and adopting many of her practices. He found joy in small, everyday moments, feeding the twins together, cleaning up toys, or simply watching Grace hold them gently. These shared routines allowed the connection between him and Grace to develop naturally. Their closeness did not appear suddenly. It grew quietly, like something meant to be. The house, once filled with fear and confusion, now carried laughter, softness, and the comforting presence of someone who genuinely cared. Jonathan often reflected on how much his life had changed since the difficult events with Vanessa. He understood now that Grace had always shown qualities he admired, but grief and confusion had kept him from seeing them clearly. He remembered moments when she had supported Emily during her pregnancy, moments when she had comforted the twins after they were born, and moments when she had stayed strong even when the entire household collapsed into suspicion. Looking back, he recognized how many times she had been an anchor for the family. He felt grateful in a way words could not fully express. This gratitude slowly turned into admiration, and admiration grew into affection. He valued her calm presence, her gentle smile, and the way she always focused on what truly mattered. Grace never tried to impress him or make herself appear important. She simply lived with honesty, and that honesty drew him toward her more each day. Jonathan felt his feelings grow slowly, but with certainty. He understood that Grace had become a central figure in his life long before he even realized it. She represented healing, hope, and a fresh start after a period filled with pain. Grace, on her side, also experienced a shift in how she saw Jonathan. She had always respected him, but after the ordeal they endured, she began noticing sides of him she hadn't seen before. She saw how deeply he loved his children, how hard he worked to rebuild his confidence as a father, and how sincerely he regretted the mistakes he had made. She witnessed his efforts to become more present and attentive, both to her and to the twins. Grace appreciated that he never hesitated to admit his faults, and that he treated her with genuine respect after everything. Their conversations became warmer, marked by mutual understanding and shared trust. She admired his resilience and his willingness to move forward instead of remaining stuck in guilt. Grace never expected anything beyond their daily routine, but she felt a growing affection she couldn't deny. Being with Jonathan and the twins gave her a sense of belonging she had quietly wished for but never dared to imagine. She found comfort in the way their lives connected so naturally, each day building on the last without pressure. This gentle closeness created a bond between them that neither of them forced, one that simply grew stronger with time. As seasons changed, the household settled into what felt like a new beginning. Mornings started with the soft sounds of the twins playing, followed by peaceful routines shared by Jonathan and Grace. Evenings were warm, filled with simple conversations or quiet laughter as the children explored their surroundings. The mansion, once marked by fear and tension, now felt alive and warm. The employees noticed the harmony and often commented on how peaceful the house had become. Jonathan's mother visited and immediately sensed the positive shift. She watched how Grace cared for the twins and how Jonathan watched Grace with admiration. She saw the comfort and trust between them and felt relieved to witness her son surrounded by sincerity and stability again. The mansion regained a sense of balance, as if every room had been cleared of the heaviness that once lingered. Grace continued dedicating herself to the children, but she no longer felt like an outsider. Jonathan included her in every decision involving the twins, and she slowly became part of the emotional core of the family. Together, they created an environment where love could grow easily and without fear. The house, once filled with doubt, now carried warmth, hope, and the gentle routine of a family healing and discovering new forms of happiness. Eventually, Jonathan reached a point where he knew exactly what he wanted for his future. He had spent months observing the way Grace cared for his children, the way she supported him without judgment, and the way she helped rebuild his life with quiet strength. One evening, in a simple and sincere moment inside the mansion, he asked Grace to marry him. There was no grand decoration, no audience, only the two of them standing in the place where their bond had grown naturally over time. Jonathan spoke with honesty, telling her how much she meant to him and how deeply he valued the life they had built together. Grace felt tears fill her eyes as she accepted, overwhelmed with emotion and gratitude. Their wedding was held at the mansion, simple and intimate, surrounded by the people who had witnessed their journey. Noah and Liam, now older and full of joy, stayed close to Grace throughout the ceremony. The atmosphere was peaceful and full of genuine affection. From that day on, the family found the stability they had long searched for. Jonathan felt complete again, knowing he had rebuilt his life with someone who represented honesty and kindness. Grace felt embraced by a family she loved deeply. Together, they began a new chapter marked by true affection, healing, and the promise of brighter days. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.